So in today's video, we're going to talk about a wrist move which will make the downswing so much simpler. Now, with most golfers that I tend to meet, high handicap golfers tend to get the backswing wrong, tend to overcomplicate the rotation, do things like standing up, and potentially do things like overswinging. And those are things that we want to avoid. But what I want to do is I really want to just talk about the wrist position so you can focus your attention solely on that to get started with. So what you're looking to do is when you swing to the top of your backswing position, you want to try and make sure that the bottom of the golf club or the club shaft itself is pointing down towards the target line. This would basically mean that you're getting the club on plane, and then obviously from a position like this, it's so much easier to drop the club down into this type of position, especially if we avoid doing things like, overcomplicating this wrist position one way or another. So I'm not saying it's like some sort of huge contortion, some huge sort of extensional motion in this way. I'm just saying that an element of sort of, if you like, wrist hinging needs to exist. And the reason why is it helps the club stay on plane. Now, what you also just need to very quickly understand is that your right forearm should align itself roughly perpendicular to your lead arm. Now, so that you don't get too lost in terms of, okay, Russ, well, I understand that, but where? That okay, this okay, etc., etc. So to get good practice, I'd suggest just do some practice swings, lead arm only, in front of the mirror at home or to the side of the mirror at home, and just practice letting your lead arm go whilst you're rotating your body through your shoulder line. And then from here, then place your right hand or your trail hand next to your lead palm, and then this would be a good indication of a good backswing position. We want to avoid going too vertical with the lead arm, we want to avoid getting too flat, so like so. And you can see the way now my forearm is perpendicular roughly to my lead arm, and that's again going to get me into that best position. So I'd suggest that you practice that first. But a lot of students that I work with, when I initially meet them, I'm always pushing them in the direction of doing drills at home so they can accumulate high volumes of repetition, build up familiarity, so then you can take it to the range. You go straight to the range with this, the likelihood is that you might get it slightly wrong. Now, the question would then be, if you sort of understand the idea of this, and you sort of understand that this should be roughly perpendicular to it, I suppose the question then is like, what does that journey into that backswing position ultimately look like? Well, I would say that you have options here, but when we hold the golf club, because the club shaft itself should sit just on the kind of instep of my lead thigh, and as I hold the club, if I hold it out in front of me now, can you see the way that my lead arm is at a different angle to the club? But when we hit the ball, we want the lead arm in a straight line relationship to the club. So at some stage, we need to just do a little bit of wrist hinge, like so, just to get the club shaft in line with the lead arm. That's what we're ultimately looking for. That's going to help us get into this position. So for some golfers I meet, they quite like the idea of starting the golf swing with a bit of a hinge. Sort of just getting set up, hinge it back, swing it up, and then just sort of going through the ball from there. That would work fine. Personally speaking, I tend to notice that I don't do it so early because I like the feeling in the backswing of my hands working a little closer to my body, but at the same token, I'm not doing this, okay? This would be taking the club literally to the side of the body with no hinge. See where the club is? If I allow a bit of hinge, so the way it brings it around. So I tend to feel that I take the club back a little bit, a couple of feet, and then I just allow it to progressively hinge as it goes up towards the top of the backswing position. But to clarify this and to not lose sight of when you're doing it and exactly what it is, ultimately what I'm saying is golfers that I have that are very successful and very repeatable on a day-to-day basis when they play, or game-to-game basis, end up in a backswing position where they have good rotation, good hip depth, which means not losing your posture, and they have a good arm structure to the point where they don't swing excessively long, and they get a good wrist relationship so they can get the club on plane, because from here it's going to be so much easier to just sequence that down swing and drop that club down. So if you are inconsistent, then I would certainly be sort of bringing into consideration how good you are at controlling your backswing, and certainly have a little think about that wrist move. See you soon.